Joining us today is Coralie Wales, President of the Chronic Pain Australia, who will be speaking at IIR's National Workers' Compensation Summit 2011, which takes place on the 21st to 22nd of February 2011 in Surfers Paradise. Hi Coralie, thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be here.
First of all, what is the philosophy behind taking a preventative approach towards return to work?
When we talk about a philosophy, we're really talking about how does something turn into chronic pain. So we go right back and say, well, acute pain becomes chronic pain. How does acute pain become chronic pain? You're more likely, if you have an accident at work, to develop chronic pain if around that injury there's a whole lot of distress. And it might be that there's an argument about the nature of the fall, it might be that there's an argument about which part is hurting. By and large, you can have those arguments if you want, but the chances are that you're actually making chronic pain worse. So how do we avoid that? Putting in place a level of knowledge with all the stakeholders at work, so the co-workers, the frontline managers, the workers themselves, to help them understand that acute pain only has to be acute pain if we can manage the stressors around that problem and if people don't get too frightened. Distress, argument, thinking that it's going to be a really bad problem because the pain's not going away. We need to manage those things.
How can you efficiently integrate chronic pain management into the rehabilitation process?
Well, it's a challenge because chronic pain is poorly understood. So the first step would be for all parties, including the rehab provider, the employer's return to work coordinator, the manager at work, the worker themselves, to start getting a level playing field in terms of knowledge. So I'm a great advocate of teaching what is going on when you get an injury, when you get chronic pain. How does chronic pain work? So if we can get everybody on the same page to start with, then if we can have everybody really connected all the way through the rehab process, and I suppose most importantly, maybe the most important factor is allowing the worker to choose the goals. So in the rehab process, there's an unfortunate kind of trend that happens in some quarters, which is, I'm the rehab provider, I set the goals. Well, I might not want to follow your goals if you set the goals. I want to follow my own goals. So let's hand control back to the worker to some extent, and certainly it's a very conscious process.
How can an employer provide job training and flexible hours to reduce the incidence of workers' compensation?
If you talk to rehab providers around Australia, what you'll often hear is that a reasonable amount of time for a worker to return to work is 20 hours a week, so a half time. If you've got chronic pain and you're quite disabled by pain, that might be too much. So I guess my preference is, when I talk to employers, I say the more accommodating you can be, even if it means you've got to say, well, what can I do to actually change the workplace to make it possible for this person to come back even an hour a day? Every day is good. If we can do it every day, that's excellent. If it means that we've got to fund the travel, let's do it. If it means we've got to fund the childcare at home because they're freaking out because, whatever, let's do it. Let's just accommodate them so that when they get to work, we know that they can do it. It may be that they can do a part of the job that they used to. The other part of that is engage the worker in what they think they can do. So rather than us as employers saying, well, we think you can do X, why don't we have that conversation straight up? Let's peel back all the layers. What is it that you think you can do? And let's take notice of that. So the worker then feels like there's a validated voice, that they've got a validated voice, and the employer and the worker are now engaging really productively. So that would be my recommendation to an employer.
How should rehabilitation providers and insurers work together to more effectively alleviate return to work pressures?
Okay, if you talk to those stakeholders, the insurers and the rehab providers, they will say that often a major barrier is that although there are screening procedures in place, they're often not activated early enough. And so what we get is somebody that's 6 months down the track and they're still not really receiving rehab. Early is good, early is best, we know it. So now we've got to walk the talk. So why do claims become, why do they get held up? They can get held up because there's an argument about liability. Sometimes you might have to lose the battle to win the war. So if it means that you've got to say, okay, well, this person's had a minor injury, I want to argue that, they shouldn't have a sore knee. Well, chances are, 95% of the time, if I say I've got a sore knee, I've got a sore knee. So why don't we just get on with the whole body kind of approach instead of sectioning off this person? And I think that we'll win the war that way. We might lose that particular battle, but we'll win the war by assisting this worker, reduce the stress, reduce the distress, and more likely to return to work.
You're speaking at IIR's National Workers' Compensation Summit 2011, which takes place on the 21st to 22nd of February in Surfers Paradise. What would you like delegates to gain from your presentation?
Well, I suppose the fundamental aim of any such educative seminar, lecture, is to give people the confidence that there are skills that they can learn and develop. And it's like anything, you don't start with all the skill you need. You've got to practice stuff. And some of the things that I say may be quite challenging, because I am going to suggest that not all the ways that we do things traditionally work around chronic pain. But having made that challenge, having thrown down that challenge, it's really then up to delegates to pick up those things that may have some benefit and then bite the bullet and start to practice. And I'm a great believer in networks. If you're having trouble, let us create a supportive network of other stakeholders, interested people, interested insurance claims professionals, interested employers, interested return to work coordinators. Let's network and solve some problems together. It's much easier when we're all connected and we can solve things together.
Coralie Wales, many thanks for your time today.
My pleasure.